Um, I guess as a way of background, a little bit of how I got into the cash transfer idea. I worked with the loveLife program in 2002 and 2003. We did a large nationally representative household survey in South Africa with HIV testing, and that was before we really were doing a lot of testing in men. We had data from antenatal clinics to know that the prevalence was high in women, but data was only just starting to emerge on the gender inequity between young women and young men. And so we did see, as has been seen in many places now, this gender inequity in HIV, where young women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be infected compared to their male counterparts. I think what was perhaps more shocking for us, since we had a very large sample, we could break that down by age, and we just saw this really rapid takeoff in HIV prevalence in young women, where 4% of young South African women were infected at like 15, but by the time women reached their early 20s, a quarter to a third were infected. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why that is and what's going on. And really the take home was really structural drivers, and education was really a very strong factor in all of our data. Girls who had not completed high school were about 3 times more likely to be HIV infected, adjusting for what we could. And so that really got our team thinking about what is it about education, and turned us to looking at cash transfer programs from Latin America, most notably Oportunidades, where we have seen, I think the evidence is very strong, that cash transfer programs keep kids in school, particularly young women. And so that was, we thought if education is protective, this may be a good way to get girls to stay in school and reduce their risk. So we are doing this large randomized control trial in Mpumalanga in South Africa. So as part of that, we've been reviewing the literature, because I do feel like cash transfers have become the buzz. Every time I talk to somebody, there's a new cash transfer study. I think poverty is really important, and I do think we need to look at other strategies to reduce poverty. But from a review of the literature that was just published, it's online now in AIDS and Behavior, we were reviewing studies that specifically were trying to use cash or incentives, or things like paying for school uniforms, to reduce HIV risk specifically. So we identified about 16 studies that have either been completed or in the field in progress. And sort of where we make a distinction, and I think Linda kind of pointed this out, is that I see 2 different strategies emerging. One, where cash transfers really are being used to address upstream structural factors, right? Which is where a lot of these social protection programs came from, targeting poor households as a safety net to try and reduce poverty, and thus we see it as reducing HIV risk. I think there's another stream of cash transfer incentive programs that are trying to directly target behaviors, right? So programs that are saying, if you're STI negative, we will give you this amount of money. If you test HIV negative, we'll give you this amount of money. And certainly there's a whole host of studies coming on board looking at money for adherence to ARVs, or money for people to come and test or retest for HIV, incentives for getting circumcised. I think we could think about a lot of different ways that incentives might be used, not so much to address upstream structural factors, but to directly get people to do something that we want them to do. And so for me, I guess the question is, are those both going to work the same way? And the vast majority of the evidence is from these social protection programs that have tried to address upstream factors. We don't have as many programs that have been trying to just incentivize behavior change. And the ones that we do have, I think the evidence is a little more mixed about how effective those have been. Certainly, I think there's also a lot more data on the efficacy of these programs in young people for women, as opposed girls, young women, as opposed to men. And we can talk about that too. I think there's a lot of questions about when you give money to men, and certainly from the social protection world, when money goes to male members of the household, you don't see the same benefits to the other members of the household as you do when the money goes to the female head of household. Will that be true for adolescents? I think we have some data that will be coming out that may help shed light on that. So I think it's encouraging. I think we still don't understand the mechanism of action, how these programs work in adolescence, and also the majority of programs that are out there, money goes to the head of household. It does not go directly to the adolescent, and I know, from working with my colleagues in social protection, I think there's some pushback from some groups to give money to adolescents out of fear of vulnerability and the pressure that could put on young people as being income earners in their home, and what that means for a young person if everyone in the family is looking to them for cash. But the program, so there was a big trial that the World Bank did in Zomba, Malawi, that got a lot of press. It was published in The Lancet earlier this year, where they did see a reduction in HIV prevalence and a reduction in a number of other sexual behaviors. And that program provided cash, some cash to the girl herself and some cash to the head of household. And we're doing something similar in Mpumalanga. So I think we have to think about, for adolescents, what is different from these other programs. And adolescents are different. And if we're trying to reduce their risk, we probably need to think about, is giving money to the adolescent what's key in reducing risk? And I think from a policy perspective, those are recommendations that I hope some of these evaluations can help government to understand, will we see the same effects if we're just giving money to the head of household, or do we need to think about giving money to young people as well? And so those are just some thoughts of where we are. I think we do need more evaluations to really understand how these programs are working to reduce risk. I don't think we fully understand that yet.
Thanks very much.